I'm delighted to be joined by Manchester City women's defender, Gemma Bonner. Gemma, welcome. Nice to see you. We're going to get straight into it and go back to the beginning of your career to start off with. So you were around 8 years old when you played for Leeds. How did you get into it at such a young age?
Yeah, obviously I joined Leeds when I was about 8, but I think ever since, my parents always tell me, ever since I was walking around, I always had a ball at my feet. So it probably started literally as soon as I could walk. So I always had a keen, probably, interest in football. And I started at school, in primary school, but it wasn't until, I think it was year 3 or 4, which is around 8 and 9, that you could actually join the school team. So at the same time, I obviously joined the football club outside. But at the time, my first club was Leeds City Vixens, because you had your club and you had a centre of excellence alongside it. So I actually had 2 teams outside of school as well as school football. So yeah, I was probably football mad since I was a kid. Yeah.
Amazing. And how did that actually work? Did you have to trial for the team or did you get scouted?
Yeah, the club team, everybody had the club team, but the centre of excellence, it was actually through my school. My school teacher recommended me to go for the trials, and it was you had to go through a trial process, and that was, at the time, they didn't actually have an under-10s team, so I went straight into under-12s football. I think I was 8 or 9 at the time, and funnily enough, I started in goal for them.
Wow. Never gone back to being a goalkeeper?
No, I used to actually play, because, I say back when I was younger, it was quite a few years ago now, we also used to have actually 2 teams with your club. So we used to play in 2 different leagues. So in one team I'd play in goal and another team I'd play outfield. And then, you just used to play everywhere as a kid, really, didn't you? But no, Leeds for me was the centre of excellence, was obviously the kind of best players in the area. So I kind of had that in terms of the training. And it was actually at Thorpe Arch, was the Leeds United training ground. So quite early on, from an early age, I managed to get at least, obviously, 1 solid coaching in a week from that respect.
Would you say you're still a Leeds fan now?
Yeah, I've always grown up, obviously Leeds is my hometown. I'm actually a keen Liverpool fan. So when I was young, I used to go to my sister used to take me to all the Leeds and Liverpool games at Ellen Road. So obviously now Leeds are back in the Prem. Hopefully I can get to a few more of them games, because they were literally the games I would look forward to as a kid, going to them. And I think Leeds is such a huge club, a huge city, and you can see how happy everyone is in terms of the passion, how much it means to everyone that they're back in the Prem now. So yeah, it's exciting times for Leeds. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm not going to call you a glory fan, but you support one team that's just been promoted back to the Premier League and one that's won the Premier League. Not bad time to be Leeds and Liverpool.
No, I know. Obviously, both teams have had unbelievable seasons. But for me, getting Leeds United back in the obviously Premier League, it's been such a long period. And especially, again, for the City, it's the fans kind of, you can see the amount that they take to every single game, no matter what league they're in. And I think now it's an exciting time, which it's not been for a while. So yeah, I'm excited as well, obviously, for them to be back in the league.
And talking of both Liverpool and winning league titles, at one point in your career, you won the league consecutively twice with Liverpool. How special was that? Yeah,
it was. It probably didn't actually sink in until a little while after that had happened. But looking back now, it's obviously such a hard achievement to do. And I think in terms of the manner in which it happened, I think especially the first year at Liverpool, it was unexpected. We had a completely new team. And for us to kind of do it so quickly in such a short space of time with a completely new team, and then to follow it up the year afterwards when I think everybody had written us off. I think we started the morning of the last game of the season in third position, and we needed 3 results to go our way. So when you think about it, it was, you know why people didn't expect us to do it, but I think, yeah, it was obviously a special moment and a special team that we had at that time. So I've obviously got fond memories of my time at the club as well.
And before you moved to Liverpool, you moved down to London to play for Chelsea around the age of 19. What was that like for you, adapting to life in London at a young age?
Yeah, I mean, I was at university in Leeds, and obviously I've grown up playing for Leeds, and I think although I've got amazing memories from Leeds and being at a club, it's probably one of the hardest times of my career as well. In terms of, I was still very young. I'd never really been in the kind of situation that we were in at Leeds in terms of they'd applied to get into the Super League, but then the funding was withdrawn, so that there was no longer a Leeds team effectively. And the team we had at the time, we were all so young, but it's like it would have been an unbelievable team if we'd have managed to stick together. It had so much potential, and I think at the time everything was perfect for me in a sense that I'd grown up, I'd gone through the age groups at Leeds, and I was in the first team at 16, and then I was ready. I'd done a few years, and I was just probably at the stage where I was getting ready to try and push to play on a regular basis in the first team. So then obviously it was a big blow in terms of the club kind of just telling us there's not going to be a club anymore in terms of if you want to play in the top league. So I was in a bit of a difficult position, as I said, because I hadn't really had regular, but a lot of the girls had other options, and I actually stayed and played because they went down the league into the Winter League. So I actually stayed and played for a couple of months to get some regular first team football. And from that, obviously Chelsea came in for me, which was all kind of happened very fast. And I had a few other clubs options as well, but I spoke to my mum and dad and they said we obviously were trying to decide, and I knew Chelsea was going to be my best option. But the thought of travelling to London while still at university studying in Leeds was obviously, I thought it wasn't really possible. But I'll never forget, they said, look, that's your best option, we'll support you, we'll do whatever it takes. And my dad actually drove me to training 2-3 times a week, games. Sometimes we'd end up 4 times a week, driving to London and back just for training or games, whilst I was studying at Leeds. So I still live at home, but we would set off. I'd study at uni in the morning, and my dad would pick me up. We'd leave at 2 o'clock and we'd get back at 1 o'clock in the morning. And then it would be the same the next day or whenever it was. So looking back, like without the support of them, it was never possible. So yeah, that was my kind of travelling for the 2 years.
That's actually incredible that, you did all that travelling, obviously a big commitment there from your parents as well. I suppose then, was it a bit of a relief to then move to play for Liverpool, being closer to home?
Yeah, I mean, I was coming into my final year of university, and obviously I think the game was getting better in terms of at Chelsea, I would usually only train once a week. But obviously if we had midweek games and then weekend games, because obviously we were still part-time, the girls only trained twice a week anyway. But I would only do one of the sessions because of my uni commitments and everything else. And coming into the third year of my uni, obviously I wanted to complete that. And I was spending so much time in the car trying to get the uni work done. But I wanted to finish that off with a good degree. But also I wanted to have more contact time in terms of training. Because it wasn't the same kind of training on your own and then just doing one session with the team. Plus I wanted to have more of an influence. I didn't want to be, you only train once but you're playing. So the opportunity at Liverpool came up, and the plans that they planned obviously to go full time, and which happened a lot sooner than I expected. So I think for me, it probably happened at the right time in terms of my university career and my football career.
And what's the secret to Liverpool winning the league twice? What was it that you felt made that possible?
I think the belief that we had in that team, and I think the biggest thing was that when everybody signed at the same time, I think we had 13 or 14 players that first signed. Probably nobody knew who anybody was. In terms of the majority of the squad, we'd signed a lot of foreign girls, and obviously we had the likes of Farrell Williams, Tash Dowie, in terms of the English players. But I think the bond that we had in the team, there was an unbelievable amount of respect for each other, and the whole kind of process of that was everyone wanted to win, and it didn't matter how we did it, but we still managed to win games. That we would win games 4-3, 4-2. Like, it was almost like we'd say to teams, go on, score 3 because we'll score 4. So I think that attitude has to go so much credit to in terms of the players that we had such a good mix of experience and youth players, and I guess players that wanted to prove a point, because a lot of players had come from clubs where they weren't necessarily happy, or and they wanted to enjoy football. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. We did that, but we worked hard at the same time, and I don't think anybody expected us to gel as quickly as we did. But yeah, I think the team and the management staff that we had, it just kind of obviously clicked into place pretty quick.
And now, what would you say is changed in terms of where Liverpool are at?
Yeah, obviously it's disappointing because they got relegated. But I think if you look that in terms of back in, I think it was 2014 that we were the first team to go professional. I think if you look then that every other team has then kind of pushed on, and the game's grown, and I think, you know, that every other club's come in with facilities, and they've managed to bring in the best players from all over the world now in terms of the leagues attracting that. So I think, you know, Liverpool kind of set the stall out in the first place in terms of taking it off Arsenal, which was kind of a big kind of thing at the time. I remember one game we played at the Emirates, and it was the first time that anybody had beaten Arsenal, and it was 4-0. And it was such a shock in terms of Arsenal were beaten, because they were like untouchable at the time, which they had an unbelievable team. But I think in terms of those first few years at Liverpool, it almost made everyone think, oh, it's actually possible we can do that. And I think, yeah, every other club has then, the game's just grown so much since then, and the quality in terms of the players has got better, the facilities that are available, the opportunities. So I think every club has then just pushed on. But I mean, it's what the game needs, so it's good for us as players.
Yeah, definitely. You then moved to Manchester City. For you, what was different about Manchester City compared to other clubs you've played for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's kind of different in terms of when I was at Chelsea and when I first went to Liverpool, the game was still part-time. So I'd only really experienced Liverpool. But I think when you're at a club like City, the size of the club, the expectation at the club is you have to win trophies. And I think the biggest thing at City is you, as a player, you have every possible thing that you need, whether it be from a medical side, physical side, you know, your nutrition, whatever it is in terms of performance aspect, it's all available to you, and it's up to you to then go out and perform and make the most of what you have. And obviously that's why the club's been so successful, because everything's in place and it's up to a player to go and make the most of it and be the best they can. From a player, it's a dream in terms of being at the club, and the facilities and the coaching, like everything, whether it's football side or non-football, it's all there for you, what you want as a player.
And what was your reaction when you found out Manchester City will be back in the Champions League next season?
Yeah, obviously for us, the season probably didn't end how we wanted it to. But obviously, we can't control that. And I think at this difficult time for everyone's safety was obviously the first and foremost, like the most important thing. I think football kind of goes aside from that. But I think it's definitely given us more motivation, if you like, coming into the season. I think obviously it was important that we got the Champions League qualification. I think that obviously the past couple of years that I've been at the club, we've not done too well in the competitions. So I think for us as players, it's something that we want to progress further in the competition. And we've obviously got the new manager who's come in, Gaz, and so far I think, he's been so good in terms of the training sessions, the detail and everything that he's getting on. And I think the players are really taking it on board. So I think for us, it was a big thing to get the Champions League qualification, and it's something that we're really keen to kind of push on with next year.
Looking at your international career, you've played for England at youth level. You've also played in the senior team. What was it like when you got that first call up? Do you remember where you were? Also, how did it happen? Is it over email, over call? Because I'm still waiting for my call up, so it's something important to know.
Funny enough, I was actually in the car on the way to Chelsea training with my dad. So, yeah, I mean, I never expected it at the time. But I got a phone call to say you called into the squad. The email will be going out tomorrow, but we wanted to give you a heads up. And I think it was probably a fitting moment in a way that I found out when I was on the way to Chelsea, doing the kind of long old hours in the car. It almost made it feel like all this kind of the big decision that I had to make. And in terms of going to Chelsea, it was all kind of worthwhile, because that was obviously the aim is to get into the England team. So I think, it was a bit emotional at the time, because it had actually happened. But obviously I was more happy in terms of that my dad could share the moment with me, because obviously I would never have be in the position that I am now without the support of my dad kind of taking me here, there and everywhere so that I could actually concentrate on football.
What do you remember about your England debut?
It was in Portsmouth, and we only actually found out the day before, and I remember just telling my dad, and I mean, if anyone knows my dad, he's not missing a game. So he actually drove down on his own and watched the game, and I think it was 6-0 if I'm right against Turkey. So it was kind of as defenders go, it didn't really have too much to do in the game. But yeah, it's definitely, I think, walking out for the first time, actually starting and making your debut, it's something that I'll never ever forget, and it's something that I'm always craving for more of.
I was going to say, you got called up to the She Believes Cup squad and then unfortunately didn't make the World Cup squad. How frustrating is it, and how mentally resilient do you have to be? Is it really tough sort of dipping in and out of squads?
Yeah, obviously it's so frustrating, but I think as I've gone on my career, I think I've learned that you can't necessarily control opinions effectively, which is what they are. And I think for me, all I can control is what I do on the pitch, what I do on my day-to-day when I'm at City, when I'm training. And for me, I think in terms of having that focus, in terms of I can only control what I can, and if I'm performing, then I can't necessarily do much more. So I think, it's always difficult. I'd be lying if I said that it was easy, because ultimately that's what I want to be doing, is playing for England on a regular basis. And but I think in terms of dealing with it, I have to concentrate on what I do and what I can control. And I think especially being at City, I'm surrounded by the best international players on a daily basis. So for me, I'm in effectively an international environment. So I'm at that level, so that I know that if I did get the call, then I would be ready. So I think, that's probably the biggest thing in terms of I've put myself in the best environment with the best players who are always pushing each other every day to be better, and as long as I'm honest in terms of what I'm doing myself, then that's probably how I deal with it, and I'm always pushing to get there.
Do you feel extra pressure when you put on that England shirt?
I think there's always probably an expectation now in terms of what they've achieved so far, and England as a nation, I think it's almost the attitude has changed in terms of an expectation now that we have to win things. So I think as a player, you want to feel that pressure, and it's almost a nice pressure to have in terms of you thrive on that. So yeah, I think it's obviously a big moment representing your country, and it's something that I could never take for granted, because I think your career doesn't last long, but for an international career, there's not many people that get to experience it. So you want to make the most in every kind of opportunity that you get. But for sure, it's one of the most probably most memorable things that you'll do.
Definitely. And when you were younger, who was your inspiration?
To be fair, I probably was more aware of women's football than most. In terms of, I always remember looking up and seeing the likes of Farrah Williams and Kelly Smith, and it's funny because I'm quite good friends with Farrah now. So I think when we first signed for a club at Liverpool, I was a bit like, I remember I used to look up for you, you must be so old. But no, it's crazy how kind of things come around. But for me, those two, in terms of a playing, and I think I've always been inspired by my parents. I know probably everyone says it, but I think in terms of how they've allowed me the opportunities and kind of facilitated the best for me, it's always kind of inspired me to want to achieve and want to make them proud in terms of what I'm doing. So for me, they're a huge inspiration for me still to this day.
And for you, what advice would you give to young girls and boys that are wanting to make a career out of football?
I think now, especially for girls, I think it's unbelievable the amount of opportunities and how the game's grown. And I think, there's even times now I just wish I was 10 years younger. I wish I was in your position, because I think the game's changed and it's grown so much. And in terms of the access and the facilities and what you've got available, I think the biggest thing is probably coaching. And the game, I'm excited to see where the game's going to be in 10 years' time, because everything that's coming kind of to fruition now, the players are going to be so much better. The game's going to be so far ahead in 10 years, in my opinion. And so I think for any young girls or boys especially, as long as you enjoy the game, kind of throw yourself at it. But I think the biggest thing is make sure you do everything you do with a smile. But particularly for girls, I think the attitude's changed so much. So go out there and give it a try, because there's so many unbelievable opportunities that are there for you, and you'll make some amazing memories that I don't think you would necessarily get if you weren't within the sport. So for me, you get to kind of travel, and you don't necessarily get to see much of the places, but you experience so many different things just through playing football. So yeah, as long as you enjoy it and do it with a smile, then 100% go for it.
Yeah, definitely have to agree with that. Have you had a coach that has been really influential to your growth in your career?
I'd probably say more early on in terms of a school teacher. And he actually still comes and supports me at games now. But I think he was really probably pivotal in terms of growing up, and especially in primary school, he was the one who was actually recommended me to Leeds United when I kind of first came through. And I think back then, the attitude in terms of girls playing football, it wasn't kind of highly thought of, or it was never. I was told quite a lot that you're never going to have a career in football if I had to miss a lesson, if I had to leave early to get to training or have a game, whatever it was. I think there was very few people at that time that was actively encouraging me to do it. So I'd say my school teacher back then, he was unbelievable compared to a lot of the people. And again, I think going into high school, it was a battle in terms of, even they didn't have a football team or a girls' football team throughout my whole high school period. But I think he was probably my biggest influence in terms of keeping me going outside of school and pushing that, because he knew I had potential.
What was his name? Let's give him a shout out. He sounds very influential.
It was Pete Strong. He's actually head teacher now at a different school. But yeah, I always keep in contact with him. I'll always be grateful for kind of how he showed his support for me, and what he kind of facilitated for me, even from such a young age in primary school.
Amazing. And then lastly, before you go, what do you like to do in your spare time just to chill out and relax?
Yeah, I always come back home. I still live actually towards Liverpool way, so I usually end up going into Liverpool for a coffee. That'll be probably if I train in the morning, and then we'll come back and I'll go into Liverpool with my boyfriend for a coffee. But on days off, I'll usually go straight home to Leeds and see my family. I think every day off that I get, I'll usually try and go home, see my mum and dad. And I've got nephews and a niece, so yeah, I always love going back home and visiting them. So I'm either Leeds or Liverpool on my day off. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you the best of luck for the next season.
Oh, thank you very much.